Hi, my name is Roland and today we're going to have a look on the ranorex repository, especially on multiple ways to add items to it and to build it up. Additionally, some hints and tricks for reducing maintenance effort will be presented. To give a short overview of the session today, let's see what we are going to account in the next few minutes. I'd like to start with answering the question what a ranorex repository actually is. The first way of adding items is the automated generation of repository items during a recording. Next to the automated generation, there's also a manual way using the tracking functionality. Here you could also do a shortcut with the so-called instant tracking. Another way of adding items manually could be to let the ranorex spy tool assist you. Maintaining a ranorex repository will be the next important point, and we will finish with a guideline for using multiple repositories in a single ranorex project. So let's start. So what is a ranorex repository? Basically, the ranorex repository is the mapping between user interface elements like buttons or text fields and the ranorex test automation framework. In ranorex Studio, repository elements can be linked to various types of actions like mouse clicks or key sequences, or even more complex actions like a validation. In automated testing, the separation of object identification from the logic of the test case comes with the benefit of reduced maintenance effort. That's why the ranorex repository is fully separated from the test automation actions. A ranorex repository consists of two columns, whereas the left one holds the logical names to the UI elements and the right column contains the so-called ranorex path, which is a very powerful technique to describe the path to user interface elements. A repository is stored in a separated XML-based file, and therefore it can also be opened and edited in any tool that is able to handle XML files. This provides the possibility to use version control systems. But how can someone build up a repository? What about the creation of the ranorex path? Ranorex provides several ways. The easiest way of building up a repository is to use the ranorex recorder. We start with an empty recording and an empty repository. As a system and a test, I use the open source tool Keybase, which is basically a credential manager. I simply log in and close the application. For every UI element I got in contact with during the recording, a repository item was created automatically. Thus, ranorex is able to automate the UI element using the repository during the replay. In the repository, right below the so-called application folder, which represents a dialog or a form, there is a list of all UI elements that I came in touch with during the recording. I can quickly double-check the assignment with highlighting the element. Hi, how to build up and maintain a repository in ranorex. Next to the automated way of adding items to the repository using the ranorex recorder, there are additional possibilities. One supplementary approach is to use the track button in the repository's toolbar. Doing so, a highlighting frame appears below the mouse pointer, indicating the UI element that will be added to the repository after performing a mouse click. It's always a good idea to double-check the assignment with the highlighting element functionality. The newly created element in the repository is now available for being assigned to actions performed on it. Let's do a mouse click. For saving time in building up the repository, you can also do a shortcut for adding items to it. We call this way instant tracking. It can be achieved by pressing the Ctrl key and the left window key on your keyboard at the same time. This shortcut allows you to instantly add UI elements below the mouse pointer directly to your currently opened repository. The repository items can now be used for performing actions on them, for example doing mouse clicks. Hi, How to build up and maintain a repository in ranorex Part 3. We already saw the automated generation of a ranorex repository during the recording, as well as manually adding repository items with the tracking functionality. So let's see how the ranorex spy tool can assist us in building up a repository. Additionally to the previously presented ways, there is a third possibility of adding items to the repository. The ranorex spy tool will assist you in identifying UI elements. You can open it up directly within the toolbar in Ranorex Studio. The ranorex spy tool provides a representation of the currently running processes and applications on your computer. On the left-hand side, I can browse through the applications and its UI elements manually. It is possible to simply drag and drop UI elements directly into the repository for later usage in test automation. You can achieve the same result by clicking on the context menu item Add to Repository. Let's simply run this recording and do a login. If you don't want to browse through the hierarchy of a system and a test manually, you can simply use the track button in the spy tool. Doing so, you immediately have access to the intended element and you can continue with the same steps it did before. Having the spy tool running, the so-called instant tracking assists me in tracking, especially for UI elements that are only accessible after a mouse click. Let's run the two final steps to finish the manually created smoke test. Regardless which way you choose to build up your ranorex repository, it's only a few clicks. Hi, how to build up and maintain a repository in ranorex Part 4. We already had a deeper look on several ways how to build up a ranorex repository. But what about maintenance? Let's have a look on how ranorex assists us. Especially when your system under test gets complex and contains lots of elements, it is a crucial task to keep the repository well organized and well structured. For simple structuring, you can use a simple folder to group elements. For example, grouping by type. Let's do a simple folder for buttons. Next to simple folders, you can also use so-called rooted folders, which can be used for structuring as well, but they do provide even more functionality. For example, if all child elements of a rooted folder are starting with the same part of the path, you can use the optimize folder path functionality from the context menu. This method causes a modification of the path from all child elements. The common parts at the beginning of the ranorex path from this specific layer are cut and they are pasted to the path of the rooted folder. The benefit out of that action is that changes in this specific part of the path can be done on one single place at one time without the need of modifying the path for every child element. That highly reduces maintenance effort. Since rooted folders hold parts of the path, highlighting works as well. For frequently working with the repository using the keyboard, use the arrow keys to navigate up and down. For accessing the edit mode, simply hit the F2 hotkey to modify the logical name in the left column, or press the Enter key to modify the ranorex path in the right column. To access the path editor window, simply hit the Tab key on your keyboard every time you are in the edit mode of a ranorex path. One additional useful operation that the ranorex repository provides is the cleanup functionality that can be accessed in the repository's toolbar. Here, the whole solution is being scanned for unused repository elements. These unused elements are presented in the dialog and, if confirmed, they will be deleted from the repository. The scan affects the use of repository items in recording modules as well as in code modules. Hi, how to build up and maintain a repository in ranorex Part 5. Since we already had a look on the generation of ranorex repositories as well as on maintaining them, let's clarify how we can use multiple repositories and why we should do that. Per default, every ranorex project contains one single repository. Especially for more complex applications under test, or let's say more than one team member who is responsible for repositories, using multiple repositories is recommended. In ranorex you can use as much repositories as you want. Meaningful repository separation for a division of work for team members is essential here. Please note that one recording module can only use one single repository. This limitation does not count for code modules. You will get rid of huge projects easier if you follow a divide and conquer approach. Thus, working with several small and simple repositories will be easier for you, especially if working in teams. You will therefore also reduce your merge conflicts when working with version control systems. So have fun!